Reflections. Flecks of Identity, Part 1. Excerpts from Media Ecologies, Materialist Energies in Art and Techno-Culture by Matthew Fuller. Don't document and exchange information, but think, and every thought must find its own specific and mortal form. For the desires of the flesh are against the spirit, and the desires of the spirit are against the flesh, for these are opposed to each other, to keep you from doing the things you want to do. Galatians 5:17. In her book on the mimetic theory of cultural evolution, Susan Blackmore lists a media ecology of her household. We have 4 telephone lines, 2 fax machines, 3 television sets, 4 hi-fi systems, 7 or 8 radios, 5 computers, and 2 modems. And there are only 4 of us. We also have many thousands of books and a few compact discs, audio tapes, and videotapes. A 12-hour shift operative from a security firm watching the feeds from 10 different branches of a supermarket. In my cubicle, I have 20 monitors, 2 telephones, an alarm light, my mobile, and a walkie-talkie. Aside from that, I have a copy of yesterday's paper, snot rag for giving the equipment a shine, dead scratch card from the National Lottery, and a fax machine. The streets.
Make yourself at home. We got diesel or some of that homegrown. Sit back in your throne, turn off your phone, because this is our zone. Videos, televisions, 64s, PlayStations.
More inventories, more lists. Reception centers, Geselligkeit via black boxes and soft furnishings. Gratification. You put enough bits together and they start breeding. What happens when media systems, with all their dynamics and compositional terms, are used together, clash, or are brought into some kind of co-arrangements? In Chaosmosis, Felix Guattari suggests that the range of ontological modalities, the mechanic capacity to build realities, is infinite. What is hoped for here is to gain some sense of this so-called infinity in media by means of a close launching off from a small set of elements. This video series will explore 3 themes of a scalar media ecology that can be understood in terms of its dimensions of relationality, the ways in which it is generated by, acts in, can be read by, or conversely evades or remains inscrutable to a multiplicity of compositional dynamics occurring at one or more scalar levels. Each of these themes also provides a route into a specific approach to the combination of media systems, memetics, a set of theories in which cultural elements and processes are proposed as being recognizably quote-unquote evolutionary, seamlessness, the condition of an uncomplicated confluence of media systems, and surveillance, the medial drive to spot, name, and control. These recurrent thematics of media culture will be taken up at particular moments within this video, where such conjunctions make them particularly available. Susan Blackmore's book, The Meme Machine, is one of the most straightforward attempts yet at developing a model of cultural evolution working on neo-Darwinian principles. The model she works through is that of the meme. Proposed by Richard Dawkins at the close of his book, The Selfish Gene, the meme is offered as the base unit of cultural formation and change. It is a replicator that accounts for both continuity and variation in words, styles, ideas, indeed any cultural element. According to the theory, memes are subject to the possibility of constant mutation as they pass from person to person or media to media. Memetics may reduce culture to a massively multiplayer game of Chinese whispers, but it may also provide insights into how things endure, are tinkered with, and are combined. Describing them as creatures of Darwinian knowledge, memes make an intriguing candidate for elements in a media ecology. The class quote-unquote replicator to which memes belong is also first offered in The Selfish Gene. It is worth noting that the term does not imply any necessary reference to solely biological systems. Indeed, in the context of that book, the concept is aimed quite significantly at cutting the reach of the gene down to size. This is something often missed by critics of Dawkins. Cultural evolution provides genetic replication with an additional principle that migrates, complexifies, and disturbs what would otherwise be an all too simple determination of life. While this video series proposes that a trifle more attention might be paid to all that tricky stuff between the gene and the meme, replication can be understood as an abstract machine whose activity can be recognized across a range of material instantiations. The activity of the replicator is essentially to make copies of itself. Variation may or may not occur in such replication, and there is no special limit to its material form, although the kind of rate of activity will be substantially determined by its material and its mechanisms. The primarily algorithmic replicators produced in artificial life also work on an a priori understanding of replicators as a class that is not locked into any one particular material for its realization. Robert Unger, an anthropologist and author of The Electric Meme, also suggests computer viruses and prions, such as those involved in mad cow disease, as further classes of replicators. Memetics is first used here in the discussion of hype. The purpose of this video is not to develop an extended account of memetics, nor even endorse it, but to use it in two ways. First, it allows a certain insight into medial drives. The possibility is posed that such drives might be amenable to interpretation by the terms used to describe memes. Second, memetics is used because this approach, as a science or quasi-science at a point where it may bring new insight, be refuted, or left to drift, allows a way into talking about scale and scalar perspectivalism within media systems. As an epistemological target of the misplaced concreteness both of those attempting to refute the theory and of those trying to develop meme theory, the meme as a conceptual device has the potential for intensifying speculation on the paradoxical consequences of reflexive mediality. The meme as a more or less fuzzily defined cultural element also provides a parallel to the flecks of identity that are the objects of surveillance systems. Blackmore's pitch, following Dawkins, Daniel Dennett, and others who concur on this list of three qualities of replication, is that the design of media comes about because of the drives within memetic evolution to the greater fidelity, fecundity, and longevity of replicators. Memes, complexes of memes, and the humans that carry them, hunger for them, and are composed of them, favor those medial devices that work with these drives. Consequently, these are the media that thrive. The grab bag of media history in Blackmore's chapter on the internet offered in support of this argument is interesting, but it skims too fast over what might be said to be the fitness landscapes that compose the environments these memes shape and operate in. Meme theory needs to be coupled with other approaches, historical and biblical analysis, for example, in order to take full advantage of its capacities. Here, meme theory is used to specify the theory of the meme. Memetics is used to refer to the field of study that aims to test, use, and develop such a theory. However, it is worth briefly considering its implications for systems of media. How might it be adjusted? Which other conceptual and dynamics might the scalar ruse of memetics be coupled with or demand to bring into being? One advantage of memetics is that it does not rely on any necessary sensibility, teleology, or interpretation in culture in order to make its account of it. This allows the memetic model a real acuity and flexibility as it goes to work equally as well in the discussion of visual material, body movements, gestures, language. That it provides insight into the cultures of more than one species, as, for instance, in the song patterns of bird populations, strengthens its potential capacity to provide new figures of knowledge. At the same time, a problem with both Dawkins's and Blackmore's account of memetics is that neither is yet quite sufficiently reflexive enough to cross the categorical boundaries it constructs. In the case of Dawkins, there is a residual longing that science is excluded from being understood as a complex of memes because of its unique license in the business of facts. Science does not suffer from the pressure to adapt or sprout variations because there is only one answer, one towering column of fact, which is cumulatively built up and provides that pressure, the uncomplicated truth. Although this is a wryly admirable aim at a ruse, it is one that fails to endure any contact with the history of science itself. Science, on this account, needs to turn its attention toward its own processes of perspectivalism, that it is cultural. The varying prospects of memetics itself as a grand-scale theory rather than a localizably useful one serve to illustrate this. Meme theory profits from its lack of requirement for any incorporation of a theory of meaning or signification. Because it operates solely at the level of recognizing a something that can be copied, and that, with variations in replicative fidelity, it is or is not copied at a certain rate, it misses the opportunity to develop a more thoroughgoing exploration of cultural mutation via a consideration of factors such as perception. Alongside its model of the host, one might also suggest that the understanding of the vectors of cultural replication needs to be brought into consideration. Too often, memetics maintains an artificial distinction between a hylomorphically arranged quote-unquote content and quote-unquote form. Media, faxes, phones, books, newspapers, email, among others, do not simply afford greater or lesser capacities of fecundity, fidelity, and longevity to memes that are separate from them, but which travel through them. To achieve a level at which it can itself operate reflexively, it should be possible, to bastardize von Forster, to generate a second-order memetics. Second-order cybernetics is characterized in the moment, when a feedback mechanism gains the capacity to alter its behavior by a representation of that behavior. In the context of the scientific observation of elements and processes, such a process entails that the observer, working with an organism or social system, recognizes that system as an agent in its own right, interacting with another agent, the observer. This interrelationship requires that science and every specific act of quote-unquote being scientific can be understood to be complexly perspectival, and that rather than being spun as one cloth, science might, among other things, also usefully be estimated to be memes and complexes of them. So too the products of science, and especially here of technology. In Blackmore's book, a particular piece of software, a word processor, begins to be treated in this way, on the basis of its digital nature, allowing for fecundity and fidelity, but the World Wide Web, which at least in part relies on the easy, quote-unquote view source, replication of its source code for its proliferation, a process easily susceptible to mimetic analysis, does not. But unfortunately, as it stands, memes to meme theory are seen as being transported within a framework that, while able to treat them as simple quote-unquote content, it is not itself susceptible to being understood as cultural and hence mimetic. Geared as it is to an appreciation of fitness, memetics also tends to miss out on an opportunity to recognize or observe those memes that die out, that do not replicate beyond a certain spatial or temporal territory, perhaps even that of a few seconds shared between two people, or in a locality of songbirds encountering a car alarm and incorporating its sound into their repertoire. Meme theory's emphasis on relative longevity as a mark of fitness has allowed quote-unquote meme as a word to become narrowly identified with ideas that are quote-unquote catchy. Some memes, doubtless, according to this approach, those that will die out, tout suit, explicitly refuse mediation. Those that avoid fidelity to the benefit of variation. How, for example, do you find out that you want nothing of what might be seen as the distortions and deadening effects of media? By reading about it? Hearing lyrics that lay it on the line? It may be arguable that memetics is constitutionally geared toward a recognition of seriality, as Daniel Sperber explains, rather than singularity. But it is perhaps most attuned to those migrations between them or away from either of these poles. The advantage of the approach is that it is potentially as equally attuned to emergent gabble.
Have you ever had a dream that you could want him to do you so much you could do anything?
Catchphrases.
Yeah, boy. Yeah, boy. Yeah, boy.
Check ticking.
Minoritarian repurposings. Fashion. Collectively generated slips of the tongue.
Aaron, again, congratulations on your big Hooters. Hoosiers win.
You said what?
Wow, that was a slip of the tongue.
The unknown yet always sung words to Auld Lang Syne. That it completely bypasses the control linguistics of quote-unquote meaning. In doing so, it also revises what Anti-Oedipus spots when revisiting Sartre's configuration of the subjugated group and the subject group. Freud was Darwinian, neo-Darwinian, when he said that in the unconscious, everything was a problem of population. This captures two advantages of meme theory: that it is inherently collectivist, that it sees the individual operator in culture as a nodal point, not a totality, and that following the great centrifugal purging of man experienced in late modernity, it does not require, although it does not also necessarily negate, the model of an intentional, rational actor. But at the same time, it is the involution, recapitulation, transversality, and hemorrhaging of scales that is acknowledged, mobilized, and explored in the schizoanalysis proposed by Guattari that is missed in existing theories of the meme. If extramediality is always in relation to media, memetics too operates in unspoken relation to that which it fails to register. In Chaosmosis, Guattari reintroduces Bakhtin's list of 5 dimensions in which poetry operates. The 5th on the list recapitulates the whole. the feeling of verbal activity in the generative action of a signifying sound, including motor elements of articulation, gesture, mime. The feeling of a movement in which the whole organism, together with the activity and soul of the word, are swept along in their concrete unity. For Guattari, this conception of poetry powerfully amasses corporal and incorporeal universes of signification. It, like much also in the valuable work of Bourdieu, Kristeva, Moss, and others, provides a multi-layered and processual account toward understanding the generation of an existential terrain, a poem, a subjectivity. There is an interplay of constraints and freedoms, affordances of imaginal and sensory domains that each media composes. This is what memetics is able to slice across. It takes part in and produces the world by collecting traces of a particular kind. It makes them relatable, but a substantial question remains as to whether it can make them available to sense or to understanding in any more useful way. For its own scaled constrained purposes, it does not need to. At the same time, Blackmore's triad of powers, fecundity, longevity, and fidelity, remains useful. These three forces provide a schema that, once it is recognized that media systems are also susceptible to analysis as memetic, can be understood as drives in the sense in which that term is being used here. That is, they can be understood as analytical devices for the recognition of affordances in Gibson's use of the term, but also as partially and combinatorially self-propulsive, or virtual patterning energies that exist within and between medial systems.